And I'd like to call to order the joint meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Housing Authority for November 16th, 2010. May we have roll call for the council, please?
Council members: Draymond.
Here.
Friedman. Caro.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Najarian.
Here.
Could I have a roll call for the Housing Authority?
Authority members: Draymond.
Here.
Friedman. Mincy.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Farazian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chair Quintero.
Here.
May we have your report,
The
please?
agenda for the November 16th, 2010 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Wednesday, November 10, 2010 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. The first item?
For you today is Director of Community Services and Parks regarding status of program planning for the fiscal year 2011-2012 CDBG, ESG, and Home Annual Action Plan. At 1A is Council motion approving the CDBG program priorities and proposed CDBG funding allocation plan by funding category for fiscal year 2011-2012 and approving issuance of an RFP to the community and city departments for social service and capital improvements project. At 1B is authority motion approving the CDBG program priorities and proposed CDBG funding allocation plan by funding category for fiscal year 2011-2012 and approving issuance of an RFP to the community and city departments for social service and capital improvements projects.
Thank you. Mr. Starbird.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll go to Jess Duran, Assistant Director for the staff report. Jess?
Thank you, Mr. Starbird. Mayor Najarian, members of the City Council, Chairman Quintero, members of the Housing Authority. As you know, every year the city is eligible to receive approximately $6 million in funding from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development for community development, housing, and economic development programs in the city of Glendale. And to access this entitlement funding, the city is responsible for developing an annual action plan for the use of these funds and following HUD guidelines. The actual plan incorporates CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, Emergency Shelter Grant, or commonly known as ESG, and HOME, which are housing funds. However, program planning is focused on CDBG, so we're going to focus on the CDBG program today. So the purpose of today's meeting is to review the funding priorities for the fiscal year 11-12 CDBG program, to approve a proposed fiscal year 11-12 CDBG funding allocation plan by funding category, and to approve the issuance of a request for proposal to the community and city departments for the funding. The estimated funds available for the fiscal year 11-12 annual action plan under the CDBG program is $3,810,482, comprised of the entitlement award of $3.437 and reprogrammed funds totaling $373,482. Reprogrammed funds derive from, this year they're going to derive from 2 recaptured projects and funding from a project that was completed and had surplus funds. Under ESG, we're anticipating $143,000, and under HOME, $2,200,000 to total $6,153,482 for fiscal year 11-12. And as I mentioned earlier, our program planning focus is on the CDBG funds. CDBG funds have the greatest amount of flexibility. The CDBG funds is the largest entitlement and the highest demand for service and the greatest participation on the part of the community. So we focus on program planning for CDBG. National objectives, as you're probably all familiar with, are very simple: to eliminate conditions of slum and blight, or to provide programs and services that benefit low and moderate income persons, including the homeless, elderly, and the handicapped. In developing the plan, HUD requires that the city involve citizens in the plan development and approval process. As a result, the City Council appoints a citizen CDBG advisory committee whose responsibility it is to help oversee the CDBG program planning process. The committee's current responsibilities include to review and comment on the annual committee needs assessment, to recommend program priorities to the City Council, which are based on findings from that committee needs assessment, as well as taking into account input it receives from the City Council throughout the year. Also, to review subrecipient performance, such as conducting site visits, reviewing quarterly reports that are submitted to the department, reviewing monitoring summary reports, and reviewing the expenditure rates of the organizations that receive CDBG funds. And the committee is also responsible for evaluating funding proposals, including interviewing community agencies and city departments, reviewing and approving any revisions or amendments to projects throughout the program year, and to review and recommend reprogramming of funds and to submit those recommendations to the City Council. So the CDBG Advisory Committee has reviewed a proposed preliminary funding allocation plan for fiscal year 11-12, and that plan includes an allocation for planning, program management, and oversight or administration, which is the 20% allowed by HUD, which actually represents a $26,000 decrease from the current year. It includes the allocation of 15% of the entitlement, which is the maximum that HUD allows for social services. That $515,000 represents a $19,000 decrease from the current year. And then it includes $2,608,482 for capital neighborhood improvement projects, and that amount represents a $140,000 increase over the current year. The capital improvement allocation also includes pre-designated projects which reflect the City Council's highest priorities for the use of CDBG funds in our neighborhoods, and it includes an allocation of $332,482 for the to be made available to the community under a request for proposal. Those pre-designated projects consist of the Southern Glendale Code Enforcement Program at $420,000. It includes a park project in the amount of $1,268,000. The park project that we are probably designating is going to be installing artificial turf at Pacific Park. We cannot maintain the field because it is so heavily used, and as someone pointed out earlier, a speaker pointed out earlier, the demand for having it available for soccer is tremendous. So we thought that this year our highest priority would be artificial turf at the Pacific Park, a soccer field area. Also included as pre-designated projects is our Section 108 loan payment for the Edison Pacific project. This will be our 9th out of 10 payments, so we have this payment and then one more left. That's $247,000. And we also have to budget for our new Section 108 loan payment, which is part of the New Path project. And we estimate that that's $240,000. We're also proposing a business technical assistance program with an allocation of $100,000. This is a program strategy that was part of our 5-year plan, which was reviewed and approved by the Advisory Committee and the Council last year. And it is to provide technical assistance and counseling to businesses in Glendale with the idea of retaining or creating new jobs that currently don't exist in Glendale, and then to be able to refer participants at the Verdugo Job Center into those newly created and developed jobs. So that totals the pre-designated amount that is being proposed as part of the 11-12 program. I wanted to expand a little bit more on the proposal evaluation process this year than I usually do. But once we issue the RFPs, historically we receive 30 funding proposals, of which 25 that come in would be for social services, 5 that come in would be for capital improvement projects, although in the current year we actually received and funded 6 community capital improvement projects, but It's more normal to receive about 5. During the RFP, the city conducts 2 technical assistance workshops. One is conducted during the first week that the RFP is out. The second, and that's a mandatory workshop. The second workshop is conducted the week before the proposals are due back into the city of Glendale. And the purpose for these workshops is to review the requirements of the RFP with the agencies and departments planning to submit funding proposals, and to be able to answer any questions that they might have. Once proposals are received, staff prepares a one-page bullet point analysis of the strengths, weaknesses, or any discrepancies that are in the funding proposal in relationship to the requirements of the RFP. The agencies and departments have 1 week to submit a response. So once we do our analysis, we send it out, and we allow 1 week for the agencies and departments to respond to our analysis and to respond to anything that we pointed out as weaknesses or discrepancies on the proposals. Then we take those analysis and responses, we attach them to the proposal packets, which are then forwarded to the CDBG Advisory Committee, and that's a very thick packet. These packets are delivered in cardboard boxes. The committee has 3 weeks to read every proposal and do their own evaluation, and we give them evaluation worksheets. And then the committee interviews each agency and city department. The committee deliberates, and they develop funding recommendations based on their study of each proposal and based on what they were able to glean during the interviews. In terms of the proposal evaluation criteria that the committee is asked to follow, and again, I want to expand on this a little bit more this time than I normally do. They will look at the overall quality of the proposal. They will evaluate whether the project meets a program priority. So one of the program priorities that we've identified and that you are approving today, the ability of the applicant to substantiate that their project does indeed meet a community need in Glendale, whether the proposal clearly articulates a target population and an outreach strategy to be able to reach that population, whether it demonstrates coordination and collaboration with other agencies and programs. That's a very healthy thing, to be able to coordinate your services with other existing programs in the community so that we're not duplicating or overlapping. And the advisory committee will evaluate the program goals and outcomes and try to ascertain that those are adequately measurable outcomes. The committee will look at the feasibility of proposed implementation plans, and this is especially important with capital improvement projects, whether their implementation plan or milestones makes sense. The committee will look at the budget, cost effectiveness, and leveraging of funds, and demonstrated experience, effectiveness, and financial capacity of the sponsoring organization or city department, including performance history. Sometimes we get criticized because it's so difficult for a new or small organization to break through, to begin to receive CDBG funds and participate in this process. But a lot of times they're not able to meet that last criteria in terms of demonstrated capacity, or they're so small they don't have a history or a financial history, and so they would be weeded out by the CDBG Advisory Committee as an example. And other times we have new organizations that submit a proposal and they do a dynamite job and they're able to break through and participate in the city CDBG program. The last thing I'd like to say is that we do plan to return in approximately 3 weeks, or in 3 weeks, with a report to discuss in more detail the standards, guidelines, and requirements for vetting funding proposals and evaluating and monitoring the financial capacity of nonprofit organizations. Obviously, in light of what we recently experienced with one of our nonprofit organizations. But in order to stay on track with our program planning schedule and to meet all of the steps required by HUD, and to be able to begin the fiscal year 11-12 program on July 1st, we would like the City Council and Housing Authorities approval at this time, of the proposed program priorities, the proposed funding allocation plan by funding category, and to be authorized to proceed to issue the RFP to the community and the city departments. This concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, I have a few questions. I don't know if Parks is around or Starbird can answer it, or you best. In terms of the funding for that Pacific Park, that would take care of the whole artificial turf issue? That amount?
Chairman Quintero, we believe it would, yes.
Okay. Now, as far as the new field there at the elementary school, Columbus, where are we on that funding? Have we allocated funding for our portion of the field and lights, et cetera?
I know there's an amount of CIP funding. I think they're currently in the environmental impact report stage.
Right.
So it's...
If I recall correctly, we have $3.6 million in the CIP carved out for that project. I believe RDA, Redevelopment Agency, bond funds. They are currently in the EIR phase of the project. I don't know exactly the status currently, but they're getting very close to the conclusion. The two issues being principally lighting and noise,
right,
and the impact on adjoining residents. And I don't know offhand the conclusion of the EIR on that. And that will all be coming back to you, though, because you would need to likely certify the EIR in order to proceed.
Because in terms of capital improvement projects, I think the city is to the wall in terms of what we can do. So very interested in trying to do everything that we can with the CIP money, not social service, but with the CIP money, make sure that we fund all of the projects that we've been talking about.
Any other questions?
No question.
Ms. Parazian?
The money in amount of $301,000 that were funded from the CDBG program to New Horizons. After we get back the amount, after the sale of the property, will the money go back to the CDBG program again in fiscal year 2012?
As Commissioner Parazian, once that money is repaid to the city, we will make a report to the advisory committee and then to the city council on how you would like those funds reprogrammed. For example, if it were to be paid back very soon, we would make a report and probably consider adding those funds to an existing project or a proposal that will be submitted as part of the current program planning. If it's paid back 6 or 9 months from now, we'd probably recommend to roll it into the 12-13 program planning cycle. However, $131,000 of that amount is economic stimulus funds, and we have to spend that very quickly. So we would probably do a quick abbreviated RFP and try to find an eligible, shovel-ready capital improvement project to use at least that $131,000. But once we know if and when those funds will get paid back, we will come back with a report for direction.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. And the proposal evaluation criteria, is this something that's set by HUD, the very last two slides that you, or is this something internally that we've developed? Story.
Yeah, it's Mayor Najarian. It's actually, the best way to describe it is it's a combination. HUD has its general guidelines, and then we add into that our local requirements for vetting out proposals.
Okay. The other question is on the pre-designated projects. At what point, if we approve the action plan today, are we in a sense approving those pre-designated projects?
Mayor Najarian, we call this, and HUD's expectation is that at this stage, this is a preliminary proposed funding allocation plan, meaning that it can be changed, it can be amended, depending on what proposals come in, or what transpires between now and, say, next January or February. In March, you will be approving the final action plan with the final list of recommended projects. So it could still be amended.
And the reason I ask that is, the pre-designation of that park project of $1.3 million seems to be a pretty large policy decision that we just see it as a line item. I, for one, would like to see what the other candidate projects are, so we, as a council and as a housing authority, can go through them and see, what priorities and policy decisions we'd like to make on that. So I feel that I would like to see what other, I'm not saying that's a bad item, but there may be others that may better reflect the council and the authorities' intentions.
Yes, Mayor Jaron, absolutely, and there is precedence for that. There is precedence where, in a couple of occasions, the committee proposals had come in, and the advisory committee felt that they were good, solid, high-priority proposals. There wasn't enough funding in the allocation for the community projects, but the advisory committee went ahead and recommended to the city council to borrow, if you will, some funding from the city pre-designated amount in order to be able to fund a community project that the committee felt very strongly about, and the council listened to that and approved it. So it is possible to do that.
You're referring to, obviously, the Pacific Pool project, which was reallocated.
Right.
And I know it was pulling teeth.
Replenished.
Pulling teeth, I might add, to get $500,000 allocated over several years. I see we're being very generous with a one-time $1.3 million allocation to the turf. I'm not saying that's a bad allocation, but not so. My question is not so much the let's say the private applications versus the public, the city's pre-designation, but within our own city projects that we may wish to pre-designate. I don't. Off the top of my head, I don't know what's out there. Mr. Quintero raised one issue of the Columbus soccer fields, and apparently there's some other funding for that. But I certainly would like a refresher and see what sort of capital projects are eligible, and this may very well be the most meritorious allocation, but I would like to see that and say, oh yeah, that's right, this is a good allocation of the funds. Mr. Starbird.
Yeah, I would agree, because I don't think Pacific Park Soccer Field is in our CIP, right?
No, it's not.
No, so it's not been discussed by you in the context of the broader capital improvement program, whether CDBG funded or funded from other sources. So I would agree. I think that needs some vetting before you make a decision on this allocation.
Mr. Quintero.
The 1268 park project.
1268.
What is that?
That's what we were just talking about. That's noted as artificial turf at Pacific Park Soccer Field. And again, you've discussed various soccer fields, including Columbus and others.
Yeah.
This has never been on that list. So this is an item identified by staff, but as yet has really not been considered by you in the context of the overall capital improvement program. So I tend to agree with the mayor. I think we should bring that back and let you vet that out relative to the other things that are and are not being funded in your CIP that could be CDBG eligible.
And I've already been receiving inquiries from excited nonprofits, service providers. Can you remind me when the window period, when the RFP will go out? I mean, that's the official day of, first day of hunting season, if you will. That's when it starts. When is that about?
Jaron, the RFP will be released this Friday. We will publish an ad in the paper. It'll be on the city's website, and we will send a notice to all of the organizations on our mailing list.
Okay.
So everyone will be aware.
So if I tell them, just go to the city website, and
Yep.
it's under community, what's the
Community
department
Services
called?
and Parks.
I still
Community Services and Parks.
Community Services.
Let me ask you in that regard. Jess, is the entire schedule that's in the staff report, is that on the website? Well, it might be
on the
useful to
website.
make sure we have the entire schedule that's in the staff report on the website so people can see the process flow. So if they have an interest, the 19th is the first step, but there's multiple steps that
Yes.
follow after that to eventually get a recommendation to you all.
We'll make sure it gets on the
Make sure the
website.
schedule's on the website.
Thank you for your answers. Any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion for
Miss-
council.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr.
So in terms of the pre-designated allocation, do we, for the park project, do we undesignated or do we leave it as pre-designated for now with the understanding that the advisory committee and the city council could modify that based on community proposals that come in and after they're weighed, what the priorities look like?
Why don't you undesignate? That's the way everything used to be. It was only recent years we started designating.
Well, and the only problem is that might give a false sense
Yeah.
of
That's exactly right.
hope to other
Right.
groups.
Yeah,
Why don't we earmark it
Oh.
as a
Oh,
pre-designated?
we don't do earmarks in this country.
Not anymore, at least. Mr. Starbird. But just keep it in as a placeholder.
I suggest you keep it in as it is, but we will come back to you with a CIP in plenty of time for you to determine whether you'd want to release it, change it to something else. But this way, at least you don't get the other nonprofits thinking there's $1.2 million up for grabs.
Mr. Quintero.
Well, and I'd also, so what do we have in terms of CIP for nonprofits? 300 and...
It's 300 and...
373 and change.
Right. Okay, well,
Oh.
now, does that mean that we are not going to have any city proposed CIP go for that 300 and whatever the amount is?
That's correct.
Well, that doesn't sit well with me because, quite frankly, there's lots of things that we need to do in this city, and I don't see why some of our own departments that falls within the CDBG guidelines can't go after that money. I mean, we're going to be facing the wall in our next budget study sessions, and nonprofits have the ability to go out and solicit money from grants, from fundraising, et cetera. We don't. Our different departments don't. So I'm not too happy that we've walled off that money to our own projects. Anyone else feels, but
Mr. Draymond.
Oh, I agree with that completely. Absolutely. I don't think it's any secret that this, from a budget standpoint, there is no CIP program in the city of Glendale at this point. And to the extent that this could be used to bolster or be used in any kind of a project, as was stated, through a department that that would qualify. Let's put it that way. Yeah, we should absolutely make use of those funds if we can.
Yes, Councilmember Draymond, or Mayor Nigerian Councilmember Draymond, when we began this, prior to developing a proposed funding allocation plan, we did send an email out and had meetings with the city departments and asked them to submit to us any proposal ideas they had for the use of CDBG funds. And the only proposal, we only received two, both of which were not eligible for the CDBG funds. For example, the library and information services got together and wanted to propose a $100,000 fiber optic project, which we checked with our HUD rep and determined that wouldn't be eligible, unfortunately. So the departments have had an opportunity to determine whether they had projects they want to submit for funding.
So, Mr. Duran, you're saying that our departments are just not creative enough?
Well, the CDBG funds have to
I'm
be...
teasing you,
Yeah,
Mr.
okay.
Duran.
They have to be used in southern Glendale.
Sometimes a light bulb goes off over the head of an elected official as we get into this process. And, for example, the pool. At that time, there may have been no department that stepped forward as well, or that qualified. So, just saying, I don't think we should foreclose that and just say, okay, well, we don't. There is nothing that may come up where one of our departments might want to try to make use of those funds, apply to make use of those funds.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to say quite likely it would come from parks in the sense that those are the census tracts in the southern part of the city. The parks need attention, et cetera. I mean, I just think it's worth, if the projects don't have any merit or, don't have the merit that others do, then that's it. They're not going to make it. But
Yeah. Mayor Najarian and Councilman Quintero, we've done that as well, where under the 332,000 proposals that came in, the advisory committee did not think merited funding at that time. There were questions about their readiness to implement or their budget, or they were new and we weren't sure about their demonstrated effectiveness. But we had community funding left over that was then reallocated to a high priority city project. So it's gone both ways.
in the coming year, in addition to the money that we'll get back from New Horizon, then there's also YWCA money that wasn't expended.
Correct, but that's incorporated into the.
Oh, that's already part of them. Okay.
Mr. Starbird.
I was just going to note, I think your staff, based on previous years, has been a little sensitive to applying for all of the CDBG capital money, but I think they're more than willing with respect to this year, because you've pre-designated the lion's share of it. With respect to this, if we let it be known, departments, you can submit an application along with everybody else. Believe me, the needs will be there. It won't be hard to find needs in existing city parks or other places for the 370-some thousand.
Just to be clear, whether HUD agreed or not, I wouldn't have voted for the fiber optic project, quite frankly, over something else. But, let's see what's out there.
If that's what you want, I think that's pretty easy.
That's part of the reason to talk
So
about.
Jess is hesitating, so.
No, if I may, so the direction is to open up the 330,000 available to committee to city departments as well? Is
I
that?
understand. Allow that to
Okay.
allow that to be competed for with city departments, with nonprofits, and then the CDBG committee would give you their recommendation on those.
That's why I said don't designate things, because in the past, the recent past, and then departments are reluctant, figuring, well, council's already predetermined certain areas, so why bother? So if we're truly going to open it up, let everybody compete, well, so be it. Competition's good.
And in fact, I know you've pointed out many times in the past, Mr. Starbird, many cities do not open it up to the private groups, that the cities allocate and program all those funds themselves. But in any event, what we're asking for then is a list of potential uses, and that will be weighed first by the committee and then ultimately by council for the allocation and apportionment.
So if I can, with respect to the 333,000, the other pre-designations would be approved. We'd come back to you on the $1.2 million to discuss that item in the context of the overall CIP. The 332,482 would be open to both city as well as outside nonprofits to make application for through the CDBG committee process.
I believe that's
What I'm hearing. Okay.
Do that, okay.
Okay, so with that amendment, Mr. Howard, to both the council motion and the authority motion, is there a motion?
I will move for the city council.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond.
Yes.
Friedman. Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes.
I'll move for the housing.
Second?
Roll call.
Authority members Draymond.
Yes.
Friedman. Mincy.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Brazilian.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Chair Quintero.
Yes.
Move to
to
adjourn
adjourn.
for authority?
Second?
Adjourn for the yes for the House authority.
Okay, so it's just council.
Moved to adjourn for the council.
Second.
And council's adjourned.